Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
President George Bush speaking from the White House this evening after a day which has seen the worst terrorist attacks in history occur in the United States. The World Trade Center destroyed, the Pentagon, part of the Pentagon destroyed. Don Gagné is here with us in the studio. Don, the president set this up as a conflict between good and evil, and particularly in biblical terms, talking about the valley of the shadow of death. He talked about terrorism as a war and said that the United States would win the war against terrorism. He said that the United States has stood down enemies before. Very sort of militant kinds of prose from the president, but no plan, no specifics.
No specifics, because they don't feel prepared at all to offer any specifics yet. They are getting intelligence information. There are intercepted phone calls. They're getting intelligence reports of phone calls saying targets have been hit. But Ari Fleischer today, the president's press secretary, talking on Air Force One on the way back to Washington from Nebraska, told reporters that they have to be very careful that the information they have is accurate before any response is taken. But again, the president was attempting to show that once they come to that point, once there is a degree of certainty that there will indeed be a very strong response, and he made the point tonight that no distinction between the terrorists, he said, who committed these acts and those who harbored them will be made. There will be no distinction, so they can all expect a response.
The president appeared to wish to reassure the American people that the government would be open for business, that financial institutions would remain strong.
The American economy will be open for business tomorrow. That was the second part of this speech, that the American way of life is not threatened, that life goes on here, that we will not retreat.
Don, it's hard to say how any administration could prepare for a day like this, but Do you have the feeling that there was a confident reaction from the beginning, from the Bush White House? He was in several different places. He's come a little bit late to Washington to make this address tonight. What do you think?
It's hard to say. They were thrown by this like the rest of the country. He did make the point tonight that when they got the first report that the first plane had crashed into the one tower of the World Trade Center, that they put the emergency procedures into effect. But then, and perhaps it's the nature of something like this, the president was out of sight and out of touch for a good bit of the day, except for very short statements that he made. One from Louisiana, one earlier in the day, very brief, from Florida. The White House said that that was all necessary as part of the caution that has to be taken while the national security team assesses the situation and the real threats. But they did feel compelled to have him make this national broadcast tonight.
Our colleague Robert Siegel is standing by in New York. Robert?
I was just, first of all, Don, remarking on that statement by the president that we'll make no distinction between terrorists who did this and those who harbor them. Do we assume that means not only bands of terrorists, but nations where they have bases?
He didn't go into any specifics, but I think that is a reasonable assumption to make. If they feel they have the evidence drawing those kinds of connections, I think we may indeed see responses against nations.
Let's turn now to our diplomatic correspondent, Mike Schuster. Mike Schuster, if indeed, as the president says, the U.S. military is powerful and it is prepared and will make no distinction between terrorists who did this and those who harbor them, which nations might be worried about that at this point?
Well, obviously, Afghanistan, Robert, is number one on the list because that's where Osama bin Laden lives, and that's where his organization, Al-Qaeda, maintains training camps. And